Now, rights-based theories have traditionally only recognized rights for humans. Rights have not traditionally been extended to non-human animals. There are a variety of complicated reasons for that I won't go into. I just will say that it has to do with when people, rights theorists like Kant, for instance, try to articulate what the justification for rights is, as Kant does with his categorical imperative. For Kant, it requires, I'll use Kant as an example. For Kant, the foundation is the recognition of an equality between rational beings, that is, beings that make decisions, that can formulate their own ends and choose between different ends. And so humans are rational beings, but according to Kant, no other animal is a rational being because no other animal can weigh reasons and make decisions in this kind of fully rational or fully, you could say in our terms, fully linguistic way that we can. And I'm not saying necessarily you have to agree with that, but that's Kant's rationale, that's Kant's reasoning in favor of restricting rights to humans. And so, sorry, just to finish up the Kantian way of thinking about this, because only humans are rational beings, it's only humans that we have to respect the agency and autonomy of. It's only rational beings that other rational beings have to respect the autonomy and agency of. And so we have a responsibility to do that when it comes to other rational beings, namely other humans, but don't have a responsibility to do that with animals because animals are not rational beings according to Kant. But rights-based theories are similar to utilitarian theories in that they do consider the well-being of future generations. Let me rephrase that a little bit. Rights-based theories are focused on recognizing the rights of human beings, not the pleasure and pain as utilitarian theories are. But arguably, no one human has more of a right to nature than another does. Arguably, there's some kind of equal right that humans have to, say, the basic set of natural resources that are available in environments. Even non-renewable resources like fossil fuels, for instance. We could say that arguably, because they're non-renewable and there's a finite amount of them, there's a case to be made that all humans have an equal right to say what happens with those non-renewable resources. No one human has more of a right to decide what happens with the oil on the earth than another human being does. Okay, so that kind of argument is an argument based on it's a Kantian style argument because it's emphasizing a kind of equal right of humans to say what happens with something, or an equal right to autonomy or self-determination. And you can make that kind of argument for lots of natural resources, particularly non-renewable ones. So if all humans have an equal right to make a decision about what happens with nature, then it's wrong for some set of humans, including, say, just humans in the present generation, to make a decision that prevents future humans from being able to contribute to those decisions as well. So this is why, for instance, on a rights-based theory, you could argue that it was wrong for us to, say, produce a kind of runaway global warming that changes the overall geological processes on the planet, or drive some species to extinction, because future generations have as much of a right to say whether or not those species exist as we do, and they have as much of a right to say whether or not climatological conditions continue as this generation has inherited them as we do. So if the case can be made that future generations should have as much of a right to decide what humans do with planet Earth as our generation does, then it would be wrong for our generation to make decisions about what happens with planet Earth that push it into some irreversible direction, like some kind of very strong runaway global warming scenario. Um, and uh, and the basis again for this argument is equal consideration or equal rights of all humans, including humans in future generations. So that's one kind of guidance that a Kantian or a duty-based, rights-based theory could provide in regard to environmental issues. Now, I want to use the example of the treatment of animals in rights-based theories, just to talk about briefly, because it's an interesting contrast with consequentialism. And it also shows, it just shows something kind of remarkable about the tradition of ethical theorizing in the West. So Kant thought that the animals are not rational beings. They can feel pleasure and pain. But other than that, I mean, he thought they were basically like machines. And so we don't have a responsibility in the Kantian theory to maximize pleasure or minimize pain, as the utilitarians held. Kant's emphasis is on meeting one's rights and obligations. It's on respecting rational agency and autonomy, but it's not on maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. So we actually have no direct responsibilities to animals on Kant's theory, and animals have no inherent rights or rights that we must respect according to Kant's theory. However, we do have we have various kinds of indirect responsibilities in terms of how we treat animals. And I'll give you two Kantian arguments that we should treat animals humanely, partly because I think they strike us as very silly in the contemporary environment, and we can think about what has gone wrong with Kant's thinking, that he thinks that these that these arguments make sense. The arguments probably work, they're probably effective, but they just seem not sufficiently respectful of, or not sufficiently, they don't recognize the extent to which we should care about animals. Probably from a contemporary standpoint, the way we think about it. So one of these indirect responsibility type arguments from Kant is that a lot of animals are owned by people. So like a particular cow or a particular dog may be somebody's cow, some human's cow or some human's dog. And so in those cases, of course, it's wrong to harm the cow or the dog, because it's like we're harming somebody else's property, and we don't have a right to do that. Okay. But of course, the problem with this is that any cow or dog that's not anyone's property is not covered by the consideration. So we wouldn't be restricted by this particular indirect argument if the cow or the dog was, for instance, our own property. If it's our own dog, then there's nothing in this argument that would prevent us from being able to, torture and kill that dog ourselves, which seems wrong to us, I think. The other kind of indirect argument that can be made is that we do have a responsibility and a duty, according to Kant, to act in such a way that we are training ourselves to be as moral as we could be. And it is immoral, according to Kant, to behave cruelly towards other humans. We ought to, as much as possible, treat other humans in a respectful way and not do things to them that they don't want done to them, and so on. And so if we behave, this is the way this argument works, this indirect responsibilities towards animals argument. If we behave cruelly towards animals, then it's like we're kind of training ourselves to behave cruelly in general, and then we might be more likely to behave cruelly towards humans. So the argument is we should behave humanely towards animals. That is, we should not treat animals cruelly. We should cultivate a kind of sympathy in our relations with animals, because that will help us to be more sympathetic towards humans. So it's not that we actually have a direct obligation not to be cruel to animals, but it's that the extent to which we train ourselves to be sympathetic and not cruel to animals will carry over to our relations with humans. And we do have a responsibility to train ourselves to be as sympathetic and caring with humans as we can. So that's the rationale in this argument. And again, I would fully agree with you if you suspect that there's something really big that's kind of missing in these arguments that makes them problematic. And then finally, when it comes to the virtue theories, the big guidance, the big piece of guidance that they offer for how we should relate to environments and to nature is the suggestion that to be a good person is to relate to nature in certain kinds of ways. So to appreciate nature, to appreciate the beauty of nature, to appreciate the value of natural stuff, natural conditions, to appreciate and sympathize with animals, and things like that. So to follow a virtue ethics in our relation to environments is to try to cultivate this kind of appreciation of nature in ourselves and in others, to try to be the kind of people who appreciate nature, because someone who appreciates nature and values nature and respects nature is better than someone who doesn't. And so at this point, having gone over the guidance that's offered by these traditional ethical theories on environmental questions, I want to invite you to think a bit about what, if anything, seems to be missing in these theories. Are they missing some big piece of the puzzle about what we should do vis-a-vis environments, or how we should relate to environments and to nature? And I'll suggest there may be actually a single big thing missing from all of them. And I want to encourage you to think hard about what that may be. And I've asked a question about it in the reading response.